My name is Jerry, and today we're going to resume with the Learn How to Play Enemy Action Kharkov. We left yet the last time we went over movement and zone of control. Today we're going to start with combat. So let's just jump right in this and get going. I do want to thank everybody who's uh, commented on the series. I've had a lot of good feedback, and I really do appreciate it. So I'm sure it'll get better. But thanks for sticking in there and hanging out with me. So let's go to combat. So after a player has completed moving active units, they may have an active unit attack adjacent enemy units. Combats are declared and resolved one at a time in any order chosen by the active player. The active player is termed the attacker, and the inactive player is the defender. So the combat sequence is each combat is against all the enemy units in one hex and is resolved in the following sequence. So the attacker declares a target and the attacking units. The attacker declares an enemy occupied hex adjacent to at least one active supplied unit as a target of the attack and declares which active units adjacent to the target hex are participating in the attack. Attacker plays combat tactics card. So on the bottom of the card, there's a combat tactics. You can play one of those. The attacker may play one or more cards from his hand uh, as combat tactics for the attack, one at a time. If a combat tactic allows additional units to join the attack, the player identifies and moves those units. So basically, you play one of the combat tactics, you do everything that the combat tactics describes, then you can play another card. After the attacker's done, the defender gets to do the exact same thing. So the defender can play tactics cards as well. So then step 4 is the attacker draws combat chits. The attacker draws combat chits up to the maximum equal to the number of attacking units. Other factors may modify the maximum number of chit draws allowed. So there's a first thing called a required draw. So that's the attacker draws the number of chits equal to the number of steps in the defending unit. So remember that's 3, 2, and 1, depending on the unit that you're looking at. The required draw, so then the required draw takes steps. Then the declared draw, if drawing additional chits, the attacker declares the number of additional chit draws up to the allowed maximum, less the already drawn required chits, and then draws the declared number of additional chits. Examination. So as a chit is drawn, the attacker checks to see if the situation on either side of the chit applies to the combat. If so, the chit is retained for step number 5. If not, the chit is set aside but counts as a chit draw. So when you draw these chits, so say I have 7 steps and I draw 7 chits, not all those 7 chits are going to apply to the combat. It just depends on whether the factors apply. You check the front and back of the chit to see if it applies. If it does, you keep it. If it not, you put it to the side. Once the attacker stops drawing chits, the players add up the number of defender hits and the attacker hits listed on the retained combat chits to achieve a total number. So some of these chits, even though you're attacking, are going to have things that hurt you and things that hurt your opponent. So you're going to have to figure that out. So first you apply hits to the defending units. So the defender applies hits to defending units by removing 1 step per hit or retreating all units 1 hex per hit. So if the defending unit occupies an improved position, the IP marker is removed to satisfy the first hit. Up to 2 defender hits may be satisfied by retreat. So only 2 hits can be satisfied by retreat. All the other hits have to be satisfied by step losses. Apply hits to attacking units. So the next phase is you would apply the attack to the attacking units. The first attack hit must be applied as a step loss. The second and third hit may be applied by dispersing all attacking units or as step losses. So I'm going to read that again. The second and third hit may be applied by dispersing all attacking units or as step losses. All subsequent hits must be applied as step losses. So you're going to want to keep that dispersing in mind. Step number 8 is advance after combat. If the defending unit retreats or were eliminated and the attacking units are not dispersed, The attacking units may advance into the hex vacated by the defending units. If the defending units retreated 2 hexes or were eliminated, attacking mechanized units may advance up to 2 hexes. Cleanup. Both players discard any combat tactics card play, and the attacker sets all the drawn combat chits aside. So they don't go back into the pile, they get put off to the side. So attack eligibility. The attacker may attack only 1 hex at a time in a single combat. Any number of active units in any hexes adjacent to the target hex may participate in the attack. Units are not required to attack. Some units in a stack may participate while others do not. Inactive units may not attack even if stacked with active units, unless allowed by the play of the reinforced battle or assault coordination combat tactic card. So examples of attack eligibility. So A says the attacker may attack only 1 hex at a time. So as you can see, he can attack 1 hex, but he can't attack the 2 hexes. B, units are not required to attack, so they don't have to attack if they don't want to. C, a unit may attack while another unit stacked with it attacks a different hex or not at all. Does that make sense? So if I'm attacking the hex, if I got 2 units in there, one can attack the forward hex and one can attack another hex. D, a unit may participate in only 1 attack in the activation, so can't participate in more than one. E, inactive units may not attack unless allowed by a combat tactic card. And F, a defending unit may only be attacked once in an activation, and a unit that is dispersed may not attack. So that's pretty self-explanatory there. So let's go back out. A unit may participate in only 1 attack in a given activation. We just talked about that. A defending unit may not be attacked once in a defending unit may only be attacked once in a given activation. Units that are dispersed or isolated can't attack. Out of supply units may only participate in an attack in which at least one supplied unit is attacking. So again, out of supply units may only participate in an attack in which at least one supply unit is attacking. So combat tactics. After declaring a combat, the attacker, then the defender has the opportunity to play any number of cards from their hand as combat tactics, as long as at least one of the player units involved in the combat is supplied and not dispersed. So after turn 5, the Soviet player may apply combat tactics only if the combat is in a Soviet support zone. Benefits. Combat tactics benefit any units on the player's side, regardless of the formation listed on the card. Each combat tactic provides a specific benefit described on the events and tactics player aid. In addition, each different combat tactic played by the attacker allows him to draw an additional combat chit. So, in addition, each different combat tactic played by the attacker allows him to draw an additional combat chit. The German von Meinstein card provides 2 different combat tactics, and if played in a German attack, you get to do 2 combat chit draws. So the combat tactics are actually outlined. There's a player aid. I happen to have a book that I created, but it tells you everything about each of these. I'll give you one. We'll just say intelligence. After all combat chits are drawn and revealed in the combat, remove 1 chit of your choice before applying the results. You may also, at your option, replace the removed chit with another chit drawn from the cup. The German intelligent tactics cancels Soviet intelligence. So that's just one of the cards that you can use. So applies to combat once. A card played as a combat tactic applies only to the combat for which it is played. A specific combat tactic, i.e. artillery, can be applied to a given combat just once. Additional instances of the tactics are disregarded. The attacker can't play or apply a combat tactic that provides no benefit other than an additional chit draw. For example, the attacker can't play a second artillery tactic and can't play reinforced battle if no units can reinforce. So you have to be able to utilize the card. Soviet Front and Stavka cards, German Army and Army Group South cards may be played as any combat tactic. When you play one of these cards as a combat tactic, declare use of any combat tactic available to your nationality. So in those cards, you can use any of the tactics used in those cards if you're playing that card. Von Meinstein and Stavka combat tactic bonuses. Every attack conducted by units activated by the von Meinstein or Stavka command card benefits from one bonus combat tactic wild card. Every attack in the activation receives the bonus and its additional combat chit draw, and the attacking player may assign each attack a different bonus combat tactic. This is in addition to any combat tactic cards the player chooses to play for a specific action. So, example. So, units activated by the Soviet Stavka card are conducting 2 attacks. When resolving the first attack, the Soviet player chooses to apply the intelligent combat tactic as a bonus. When resolving the second attack, the Soviet player chooses to apply artillery combat tactic as a bonus and also elects to play a card listing the combat engineer's tactic to apply a second combat tactic to the attack. So those cards just allow you to have bonus and to play more bonus cards. Soviet artillery barrage combat tactic bonus. So on game turns 1 and 2, every Soviet attack against a German unit in the Soviet artillery barrage zone receives the artillery combat tactic and its combat chit draw without play of a card. Drawing combat chits. So now this is the way that we draw chits, right? The way we draw chits is the attacker in a combat draws combat chits blindly from a combat chit bag. I've got mine like right here. This is what my combat chit bag looks like. And you would just reach in and pull out combat chit, like so. Maximum draw. The maximum number of chits the attacker may draw in a combat equals the sum of the following. So they get 1 chit for each attacking unit with 1 or 2 steps. So 1 or 2 step units get 1 chit. 3 step units get 2 chits. You get 1 chit for every combat tactic applied by the attacker. You get +1 chit if the defender is out of supply. You get +2 chits if the defender is isolated. And you -2 chits if the German defender played the screen combat tactic. If the ground condition is light mud, the maximum allowed chit draw is capped at 6 chits. Required minimum. First, the attacker must draw a number of chits equal to the number of steps in the defending units, even if this number exceeds the calculated maximum. Example, if a hex under attack contains a 2-step unit and a 1-step unit, the attacker must draw 3 combat chits, even if the calculated maximum is just 2 chits. Example of chit draw. So we're going to blow this up so you can take a look at this. 5 Soviet units are attacking a German unit with 2 steps. One of the Soviet Union has 3 steps. The Soviet player played 2 combat tactics. A minimum of 2 combat chits must be drawn, and the maximum of 8 combat chits may be drawn. After drawing and inspecting the first 2 chits, the Soviet player must declare that he is drawing from 0 to 6 more chits. Once declared, he must draw that number of chits and abide by the results of the draw chip. So they don't have to take every one of those. After the mandatory or the minimum, then you can go and you can decide between how many more you want to take. So in this example, the minimum draw is 2 steps defending. Maximum draw is 4 steps, 4 2-step units, 1 3-step unit, and 2 combat tactics played. So that's how you can add up that. Declared total. Once the required minimum number of combat chits are drawn, the attacker may choose to stop there or to draw any number of additional chits up to the maximum allowed, less the already drawn required chits. The attacker declares the number of additional chits prior to drawing any additional chits. Once declared, the attacker draws that number of chits and only that number of chits. So if your maximum was 6 and you say, I'm only going to draw 3 chits, you don't get to go back and do a do-over. You draw 3 chits and that's it. Combat chit situations. As the attacker draws combat chits, the players check the situation listed on the front and back of each chit. If either situation applies to the combat, the chit is retained with the applicable side up for both players to see. In some cases, both situations on the chit may apply. If so, use the side with priority indicated by a P directly on the chit. If neither situation applies, set the chit aside. It is not returned to the cup and still counts as a chit draw. Combat chits list the following situations. Combat ratios. So those are a comparison of the attacker's combat strength to the defender's combat strength. Just like a lot of war games use for CRT, you add up attacking strength, go against defender strength, and you come up with a ratio. The attacker's strength is given first in the ratio. So if I've got 12 points and the defender has 4, and we have a 3-to-1. Basic stuff, guys. You guys know how to do that. Terrain affects the calculation of combat ratios in the following situations. The total strength of units attacking across the Dnieper River hex side is halved. Round down any fractions to the nearest whole number. The total strength of mechanized units attacking into or from a marsh hex or defending in a marsh hex is halved, rounded down. When halving, total the strength of all affected units and then halve the total, rounding down fractions. Do not have a given unit more than once. Example, if 2 units with a total strength of 7 are attacking across the Dnieper River, their strength is halved and rounded down to 3. So half of 7, 3.5, rounded down to 3. Terrain such as clear, broken, woods, town, or city applies if the defender unit occupies a hex with one of those terrain's features listed on the chit. So it'll have that on there. You use that chit. Soviet or German air power applies if the attacker or defender applied the corresponding combat tactic. So if I played the air power combat tactic card and I draw the chit, then they all work. Attacker, defender, artillery, same thing. Applies if the attacker or defender applied the corresponding combat tactic. Combat engineers, same way, if you played the combat tactic. Defender adjacent applies if the defender units are adjacent to the attacking unit, which makes sense, right? After turn 5, applies to Soviet defenders only if the defending units and adjacent units are in support. Disperse or unsupplied. Look, is that unit dispersed or unsupplied? You use it. Flank attack applies if the attacker units occupy at least 3 hexes or occupy 2 hexes not adjacent to each other. Flank attacks do not apply if the defender is in a town. So if you got 3 units around one, or if you have one on each side, pretty self-explanatory. 1 hex attack applies if the attacking units occupy 1 hex. Large attack applies to Soviet attack in which at least 7 combat chits are drawn, and to the German attack in which at least 6 are drawn. IP crossfire applies if the defender occupies an improved position. Only attacker or defender armor applies if one side has armor unit in the combat. Only attacker or defender armor applies if only one side has an armor unit in combat. The Tank Brigade or Panzer Battalion combat tactic card fulfills this requirement. Okay. Command value number applies if the attacking units were activated by a card with a matching command value, which is in the top left-hand corner of the card. And then you've got the NKVD applies if Soviet player applied the NKV combat card. So attack not supported applies to Soviet attack if all attacking and defending units are in hexes outside the Soviet support area. Defender not supported applies to German attack if the defending Soviet units are in a hex outside the Soviet support. And Soviets not supported applies to a Soviet attack if all attacking and defending units are in hexes outside Soviet support, or applies to a German attack if the defending units are in a hex outside Soviet support. All right, we're going to blow this up so we can take a better look at the flank attack situation. So Unit A is flanked because enemy units are attacking it from 3 hexes. So 1, 2, 3, right there. Unit B is not flanked because only 1 enemy unit is adjacent to it. Okay. C, even though 3 enemy units are adjacent to Unit C, it is not flanked because it's in a town. And Unit D is flanked because it's adjacent to 2 enemy units which are not adjacent to each other. So you can notice down here in the bottom, you've got here and here. So you've got that going on. Replenishing the combat chit cup. Once drawn, combat chits are kept out of the cup. After resolving a combat, place the drawn combat chits to the side with any previously drawn chits until replenishment occurs. Replenishment is triggered when a darker combat chit is drawn. Upon drawing a darker combat chit, immediately return all drawn chits from previous combats to the cup and resume drawing chits for the current combat. Then, after the current combat is resolved, return those chips to the cup as well. The combat chit cup is also replenished at the end of the game turn. Return all chips. So basically, what they're saying, I've used 12 chits. I'm resolving a combat. I pull a chit. It's a different color. Immediately, I take the 12 that I've used and I put them back into the bin that I'm drawing from. Shake them up. I continue drawing, finish that attack, and at the end of the attack, I take the rest of those chits that I've used and throw them in there, and you're starting over from scratch. Combat hits. After drawing combat chits and determining which ones apply to the combat situation, players calculate the total hits incurred by the attacking and defending units. Each combat chit lists A for the attacker or D for the defender, followed by a numerical hit result. For example, A1 or D2. Some chits list hit results for both the attacker and defender, such as A1, D1, just like you would see on a regular CRT chart. Some chits list a hit result subtraction, such as D-1. Still other chits list G for German or S for Soviet, followed by a hit number. These apply to units of that nationality, whether attacking or defending. Calculate the hits. And the subtract is necessary. We got to do some math on all the chits from the defender and attacker to achieve a hit total. So here's an example, right? So the 3 chits total A2, D2. These 3 chits on the top, they total A2, D2. 2 hits for the attacker and 2 hits for the defender. The 5 chits in the second row total A1, D2. Although the chit shows 4 defender hits, the 2 D1, D-1 results reduce the total hits to 2. If the attacker had chosen to draw only 4 chits, the result would have been A1, D3. And then the bottom one, if the Soviet player is attacking, these 4 chits total A1, D3. If the Soviet player is defending, these chits total A0, D4. So hit total adjustments. The hit total is adjusted in the following situations. If the defender occupies a town, city, or improved position, the total number of defender hits is reduced by 1. The IP marker is removed upon conferring this reduction. If all attacking units are attacked across the Donets or the Dnieper River, hex sides, defenders' hits are reduced by 1. If all defending units are dispersed or out of supply, the total number of attacking hits is reduced by 1. If the defending units are isolated, all attacking hits are ignored. If all defending units are isolated, all attacking hits are ignored. And then the application of any of the following combat tactics may increase or decrease hits to the defender or attacker. Hit total less than 0 is treated as 0. Pretty much common sense. Processing hits. After calculating each side's hit totals, the defender applies hit to defending units. Then the attacker applies hits to attacking units. So defenders take their hits, then the attackers take their hits. Apply each hit by removing a step from a unit participating in the combat, or by retreating or dispersing all participating units within the following restrictions. The defender may retreat units 1 hex to satisfy 1 hit, or retreat 2 hexes and disperse all defending units to satisfy 2 hits. So you don't take each individual unit, you take all the units and you retreat them 1 or 2, depending on how many steps you want to take off. Exception, if any of the defending units are already dispersed, that stack may retreat only 1 hex. So the first hit incurred by the attacking units must be applied as a step loss. The attacker may satisfy up to 2 additional hits by dispersing all of the attacking units. All of their attack hits must be satisfied by step losses. Player is never required to retreat or disperse units. All hits may be applied as step losses, even if this result is in the elimination of the unit. Examples: 5 Soviet units have attacked 2 German units, with 1 step and 2 steps respectively, resulting in 3 hits against the defender and 2 hits against the attacker. The defender must process his first. The German player has 3 options: apply all hits to the defending units, resulting in their elimination; 2, satisfying 1 hit by retreating, 1 hex, but then applying the other 2 hits as step losses, resulting in the elimination of 1 of the 2 German units; or satisfy 2 hits by retreating 2 hexes, dispersing all the defending units, and finally applying the remaining hit as a step loss to the stronger unit. This enables a 2-hex Soviet advance, but preserves both units to fight again. Next, the Soviet player must apply the first hit to one of the attacking units. Now he has 2 options. If he disperses all his attacking units, he can satisfy the 1 remaining hit. Only up to 2 hits after the first hit can be satisfied this way. He applies a second hit to another one of his attacking units by taking a step loss instead of dispersing. Step losses and elimination. A combat hit assigned as a step loss is applied to one unit that participated in the combat, chosen by the owning player, with the requirements of 9.61 and 9.62. To apply a step loss, flip the unit from its full side to its reduced side, or replace the unit with its reduced side counter. There's an R marked on the counter, showing 1 less dot step. First step loss to large or armored unit. The first step loss assigned in a given combat must be to a 3-step unit or armored unit of the owning player's choice if any participated. Assign step losses evenly. No unit may be assigned a second step loss in a given combat until all units participating in the combat have been assigned 1 step loss. So you can't just take a 3-step unit and reduce them twice. You have to spread that along everybody. Elimination and destruction. A unit that loses its lone remaining step is eliminated. An eliminated unit that was originally a multi-step unit is placed in the eliminated units box on its 1-step side. It may be returned to play later via replacement. An eliminated unit that was 1 step at full strength is removed from play entirely. It can't be replaced. A unit that is eliminated when in a state of isolation is destroyed. Remove destroyed units from play. They can't return via replacements. Retreats. The defender may satisfy 1 hit by retreating all defending units 1 hex or 2 hexes, or 2 hits by retreating defending units 2 hexes, then dispersing those units. The option is not available to the attacker. So the key here is, remember, you have to retreat all the units, not 1 unit. You have to retreat all the units. Exception: dispersed units and isolated non-mech units may retreat only 1 hex. Isolated mech units can't retreat at all. Soviet defenders can't retreat in a combat to which the NKVD combat tactic was applied. Retreat priorities. The defending player retreats units 1 or 2 hexes away from the hex that units occupy during combat, entering hexes in the following priority during their retreat. Into a hex not in enemy control if none available. Okay, let's start over. Retreat priorities. The defending player retreats 1 or 2 hexes away from the hex the unit occupied during combat, entering hexes in the following priority only during the retreat. Into a hex not in enemy control, if none available. Into a hex in enemy controlled, occupied by a friendly supplied unit, if none available. Into an unoccupied hex in enemy control and in friendly supply. This retreat requires a removal of a step from one of the retreating units. The step loss does not count towards satisfying a combat hit. Or into an unoccupied hex in enemy control and not in friendly supply, or into a hex of enemy control and occupied by a friendly unsupplied unit. This retreat requires a step loss, as in priority 3. More than one choice. Within any of these priorities, retreat into any hex regardless of terrain. However, retreat is allowed across an unabridged Napier River hex side only if no other hex is available in that priority. Prohibited retreats. A unit can't retreat into an unoccupied enemy town or city hex. It can't retreat across a blocked Napier River hex side, and it can't end its retreat in violation of stacking restrictions. Avoid elimination. If following the above retreat priorities would result in a unit's elimination when another valid retreat route of lesser priority would not, the lesser priority route may be taken. Stay together. When more than one unit is retreating, all retreating units must retreat together and end in the same hex, if possible. Retreat to different hexes is allowed only to avoid overstacking at the end of the retreat. Already retreated units. If a unit ends its retreat in a hex occupied by a friendly unit, and that friendly unit is subsequently attacked in the same activation, the retreated unit contributes nothing to the defense of the attack. Its steps are not counted in determining combat chit draws, and its steps can't be removed to satisfy step losses. If a defending unit retreats or is eliminated by the attack, the previously retreated unit is eliminated. So that's a biggie, right? So if the defending unit retreats or is eliminated by the attack, the previously retreated unit is eliminated. Two hex retreat. The defender may retreat units 2 hexes to satisfy a second combat hit, as long as none of the defending units is already dispersed or isolated. Upon doing so, the retreating units become dispersed. A unit retreating 2 hexes may retreat through friendly units even in excess of the stacking limit. A 2-hex retreat must end 2 hexes away from the combat hex. Both hexes of the retreat are subject to retreat priorities. Advance after combat. If the defender vacates a hex under attack by retreat or elimination, the attacking player may advance undispersed active attacking units into the hex within stacking limits. This advance may be regardless of the presence of enemy zone of controls. Units included in the attack via the assault coordination or reinforcement battle combat tactic can't advance after the combat. 2-hex advance. If the defending unit retreats 2 hexes or are eliminated, the attacking player may advance attacking mechanized units 2 hexes. The first hex entered in the advance must be into the attack hex. The second hex entered in the advance may be any adjacent hex to the attacked hex. However, when deviating from the path of retreat, the advancing unit may not move directly from one enemy-controlled hex to another. When no more than one unit is advancing 2 hexes, they may advance into different hexes. Defending units that are eliminated leave no path of retreat in this situation. Advancing into a second hex always deviates from the path of retreat. A German Panzer battalion combat tactic enables one attacking infantry unit to advance after combat as a mechanized unit. So let's go back up here for examples of retreat. So since combatants are resolved one at a time, the order of resolution will affect the retreat priorities available. Each of the attacking Soviet units in this illustration will advance 1 hex in the direction of the attack arrow. The triangle symbol shows how many defender hits have been processed by the unit. Hits satisfied by retreat. Okay, so it's just going to tell you in here. So A, this group here, this unit incurs 1 hit in combat and can satisfy that hit by retreating 1 hex using retreat priority 1. Its only choice is to retreat directly west into 1912. So it just goes back there. B, the 3-step unit incurs 2 hits in combat and can satisfy both of them by retreating 2 hits and becoming dispersed. The unit chooses hex 1612 The only other options, because a retreat priority, would have been hexes 1713 or 1812. C. Two-step units incur one hit in combat. If both units hold position, one step loss is taken. If one hex retreat is attempted, both units must retreat together and end up in the same hex together. They cannot use retreat priority 1. And then the two-step incurs. Okay, so basically, you guys are getting the point, right? If you have to satisfy a step loss, you can retreat one hex. That satisfies one step loss. If you need to do two, you can go back two. That satisfies two step losses, but you become dispersed. Advancing after combat, same type of way, right? So down here, A, the defending unit retreats one hex. Both or none of the attackers may advance into the vacated hex. That's pretty self-explanatory. In B, the defender retreats two hexes. The Soviet infantry can advance into because the infantry can only go one, but the armor unit can advance two, right? So again, same kind of rules. Advancing across the Donets and the Dnieper River hex sides, a unit may advance across an unabridged Donets or Dnieper hex side only if the attack across that hex side or is following the path of retreat. A unit advancing across an unabridged Donets or Dnieper hex side must stop in the hex across the river, even if the unit is mechanized and has advanced only one hex. Dispersal. A unit becomes dispersed in the following situations. A unit is defending in combat and retreats two hexes. We talked about that. A unit is attacking and becomes dispersed to satisfy combat hits. A unit is German and a target of the partisan uprising event. The unit is Soviet and the target of an overextended event. Place disruption markers on the counter. A dispersed unit cannot move, attack, build an improved position. They can't advance after combat either. A dispersed unit and any a dispersed unit and any unit stacked with it can retreat only one hex if attacked. If all units defending in a combat start the combat dispersed, subtract one hit from its hits incurred by the attacker, the defender can't be the recipient of combat tactics. Removal. A dispersed unit becomes undispersed when the unit is activated after all other units in the activated formation have completed their actions. The unit's dispersed marker is removed. An attacking unit that becomes dispersed does not become undispersed at the end of the same activation. All dispersed markers are removed at the end of the game turn. So that is the end of the combat. So that was a lot of stuff. We've been doing this for 40 minutes. So I'm going to go ahead and shut this down for now. I want to thank you guys for watching, do all that YouTube stuff. I appreciate the feedback. I'm really looking forward. I'm getting tired of reading rules, so I'm ready to play. So I'm thinking that once we get through, we've only got a few more pages of rules to go through. And again, this is the two-player thing. But after that, yep, we've only got a few more pages. And then after that, we're going to set up the Soviet solo, and we're going to kind of learn it as we go using that rule book. So again, folks, thanks for coming in. Thanks for watching. Until next time, everybody, be safe, be kind, and happy wargaming.